All right, let's get this started. So thank you, Eric, for the lovely introduction. As introduced, I'm Mashhood, and I am the technical lead at Recurship, which is a JavaScript consultancy based here in Karachi. We are working with startups all over the world, and we're essentially helping them make prototypes and MVPs. And over time, we convert those prototypes and MVPs into mature products. So one of the things when we're making prototypes is one of the things of concern is speed, right? Because when you're prototyping, you have many ideas and you don't want to spend too much time on any one idea. So you're iterating really fast. So what we at Recurship are trying to do, we're trying to find out ways, using the latest technology, how can we reduce the time to ship the code to production, right? And today is one of those examples where we'll try to create an app and ship it to production in the next 30 minutes. And we'll be using the latest technologies that we have available today, which is Angular 2 and Firebase. So before we can talk about Firebase, let's quickly talk about traditional app development. So in traditional app development, we have the client, which can be a web app or a mobile app, Ionic or iOS, Android, anything. And then we have the server, which is essentially the API which the device communicates with. In order to set up the server, you have to start from picking up the language, then choosing the framework, writing the code, and then deploying it. Deploying alone requires spinning up VMs, setting them up, uploading the content, setting up the database, securing it, configuring the DNS, the whole shebang, right? Now, if you're tight on time, all of this is just time that you're not developing, right? Because you're setting up everything, you're deploying stuff. And this is where Firebase really comes in handy. Firebase apps are serverless. That means that Firebase is a platform as a service. So it is self-hosted. So it's already there in the cloud, it's already deployed. All you need to do is go there, create an account, and start using it. And those who are here for the Code Labs today, they have already used it, so they have some idea of what it's about, right? You guys created a chat application today, sitting on your computers. So Firebase essentially has three main components from a developer's point of view. We have the cloud storage, which has an exabyte limit. So that is a massive, massive limit. And this is all because this is all hosted on Google's cloud offerings. So essentially, we're using the Google Cloud infrastructure here. We have libraries here to help us with authentication. These help us authenticate using complex authentication flows like OAuth, and also help us with session management. And finally, the most important part is the real-time database, which is essentially syncing JSON data across multiple clients at the same time. This is very useful because for applications like chatting, where you might have to pull data constantly, you don't have to do that. You work together with Firebase Sdk to just get those updates and update the view of your client, whichever client it's based on. So essentially, Firebase Sdk is the middleware, which sits between your app, and your app can be anything. It could be a web app, it could be a mobile app, iOS, Android, Ionic, whatever platform you're on. And on the other side, you have your Firebase, right? So Firebase Sdk is responsible for handling all the client data, authentication, and even stuff like offline usage. Authentication is my personal favorite. In order to set up a complex flow like Facebook login, right? If you Google Facebook login, SDK integration, you'll find out so many problems out there just to integrate that manually. But with Firebase, all you need to do is just call one function. And that's it. It handles everything on its own. Offline usage is, again, my second favorite feature for this. If your app goes offline when the user is using it, it will start caching the data and will sync it up whenever the client comes back online again. So all this is very useful and comes right out of the box. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about Firebase. You guys can obviously go on Google and find out a lot about it. So let's dive right into what we can build in the short time we have. So today we're focusing on building a Twitter clone. I've decided to call it Twitter, and I've listed down all the functionalities that we're targeting. So we're going to start up with creating a basic sign up and login flow. And then we'll have a Zwitter component where we'll have the ability to add new suites. We should be able to view all of the suites, delete them, delete our own, and like them as well. So we'll have the like count as well on that. So let's see. All right, I think this looks good. So this is a sample code base that I'm starting off with. Essentially, I'm using Angular CLI. Angular CLI is a tool used to scaffold Angular 2 projects. And I've just used the command, their ng command, to build the scaffolding. I've changed two things in this. One thing is I've pasted some HTML. Obviously, this is the slight boring part. I didn't want to waste time here. And it's just some basic Bootstrap class HTML. We'll see how it looks like in a second. And the other thing I've changed is I've injected Bootstrap into this project. So it looks nice, right? Cool. So this is, I've got my server already running. And this is the, let's make this a little big so everybody can see. And this is essentially the what we're looking at. So we have a basic sign up form that isn't linked. That's just an HTML stuff. We have a create suite field that will link up. We have all the suites. These are all static right now. They're not coming from a database, and they don't actually do anything. So this is all just static code right now. So in order to start converting this into a dynamic app, the first thing we want to do is we want to break down our components properly, because obviously the login code needs to be in its separate component, and the rest of the application will be in separate component, right? So I'm going to use the ng command to generate some. All right, so I'm on the master branch right now, and I'm going to use the ng command to generate a component. Now this is the Angular CLI, which is very useful in. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Zoom. Yeah, just give me a heads up if I forget about that. All right. Yeah, this is good. All right. So I'm going to use the ng command to generate the component, and I'm going to generate component login, and this will generate some scaffolding for me. I'm going to do that again with a new component called Zwitter, and this will generate another component for me. So if I go into my code now, I can see that I have two new folders here with login and Zwitter, and now I'm going to move my HTML into the individual component. So I'm going to start from here. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to move this over here. All right. So essentially, we're just splitting the code between two components so that it's two separate views. All right, got to make sure I don't copy the router outlet because we need this for our routing. All right, and we're going to paste this over here. And I do not need my login form in my Zwitter component, right? Cool. And this is done. And the final bit that I need to change is move this as well, because this is just used for rendering the static list that we have. Zwitter component and boom. Okay, so this is going to auto reload whenever I save something, and we've lost everything right now because we haven't configured the routes yet. So let us just go there quickly and do that. So right now I have no routes configured. I'm going to quickly configure my route called Zwitter component, and then I'm going to have another route for my login component. Component, right, login component, cool. And now if I come back, it is breaking because I have made some mistake. Obviously, there's going to be no slash here. And here we are. So we have our code back, but this time without the login page, because if we go to /login, that's where the code login page lives. So we have two views now already, but they don't work right now because they're not connected to any backend. So how do we go about doing that? Let's start implementing the Firebase implementation. So the first thing we want to do is we want to integrate Firebase into our Angular 2 app. So in order to do that, I have to install using npm Firebase and AngularFire2. AngularFire2 is a wrapper that's used that is made for Angular 2, and it wraps around the Firebase SDK and gives you all the functionality using observables, which is a concept in Angular 2. So while this is doing, we'll just go up here, and for those of you who did this today, you'll remember that you copied these credentials over into your app. So this is how you link the app to your Firebase backend. Yep. Let it load. We have everything copied over here, so we'll just start from here. Okay. So in order to inject this, I need to open my module. Whoops. App.module and paste the basic file here, basic settings over here. Okay. And then I just need to configure it to initialize. Yeah, and that's pretty much how we're configuring Firebase with the backend with Angular 2 essentially. So this is very similar to how you guys did it when you were doing your code labs, and you copy pasted this stuff in your HTML. And because we're using a front-end framework, we've copied the same information into our main file for Angular 2. Okay. So next up, we're going to start wiring up the login page. So let me open the login component. Oops, not the spec file. All right. We have the login HTML and the login TypeScript file, which contains all the TypeScript code, and I'm going to start importing stuff here. I'm going to call AngularFire. That's the library that I'm using, and I'm also going to call in the router, which is the Angular router, Angular 2 router. So essentially, this will help me navigate between pages once I've logged in. So I'm going to check the af.auth, that's the authentication observable that I have, and I'm going to subscribe to it so that I can detect changes on it. Once I have detected a change, I want it to call this function for me, where I can check that if I am authorized, then I can simply navigate to the home page, right, to the dashboard, to the app. And that pretty much does the sign-in part where I have to route after signing in, right? So right now I have to add two more functions, one for login and one for sign up. And just to make this process a bit faster, I'm going to copy paste this code here. So I have two methods I need to import. Okay. So essentially, as I mentioned before, when we're talking about login, this login function is taking a form object, and we're just using the AngularFire login function to log ourselves in. And for sign up, we are essentially calling the create user function, and this will create the user and sign them in as well. And also remember that Firebase SDK is also handling the sessions. So once you've been logged in, Firebase will handle the session for you, even if you refresh the page or you start a new tab. So all this is handled by Firebase, and we don't have to write any other code. So this is done. Let's wire this up in HTML. Over here, we'll have to write some Angular syntax. So I'm going to create a form, and ng model, and I'm going to have ng model over here. This will essentially define these fields in the model, and then I'm going to say when I click the sign up button, simply call the sign up function with the form, and I've referenced the form from here, so it's going to send this form object in. And when I click the login function, when I click the login button, send the call to the login function. So this corresponds to the login function here and the signup function over here. This is how we're communicating between HTML and TypeScript. All right. So I'm going to save this, and hopefully it's still working fine. And when I come over here, so now my app should be ready. So I should be able to sign up. But I need to do one more thing. Again, for those who were at the Code Labs, I need to enable the authentication from Firebase. So I'm going to go into my authentication in my sign-in methods, and I'm going to enable the email and password because that's the one I'm going to use today. So I come back to my app, and I'm going to create a user with a password, and I do sign up. And if everything works fine, we should redirect and come into our core app, right? So what we just implemented was the sign up and login for our app. All right. Next up is essentially starting to wire this component up. We have a lot of features over here, so we're going to start again from the TypeScript component, and then move into the HTML component. All right. So inside TypeScript, like before, we're going to import the services that we need, and the first one is AngularFire, and then the second one is the router. These are the two main ones that we want. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to do this in the constructor, not the on init. All right, and then inside my constructor, I will, like before, check for my authentication inside my Firebase authentication, and if I am authenticated, then I'll simply set my local user, or I'll redirect to login page. So they have a flow for that. If you want to enable that, you can actually go in here and enable it. So if they have email templates configured here. So if you want email address verification, you can actually come up here and enable that. All right. So we're going to use af.auth.subscribe again, and we have the auth object that we're getting. And if we have the auth, then we'll simply log the user for now, and later on we can do something with it. And if we don't have an auth, if it's null, that means the user isn't logged in yet. So we want to route them to the login page. Now this is not the fully proper way to handle authentication in Angular 2, but this is the fastest way to do it, so we're going for that. Navigate, and we want to go to the login view, and that's pretty much it. Okay. So if we save and we come back into this view, it's going to reload, and we're still in this view because we're logged in right now. And if you can see the console, you'll see that we're logged in as the test add user, right? So we just signed up before with this user, so we're now logged in with this user. And now when I implement the logout functionality, we'll log out and then sign back in again using this login functionality. So let's start adding the features that we want that are left. We want the logout functionality. We want to add a suite. We want to remove a suite, and we want to like a suite, right? For logout, it's very simple. This af.auth.logout. So the way we logged in, we call the logout function, and then again, this is handling the session for us. So the minute I call logout, it's going to remove everything that's stored on the machine, and it's going to clear the session. For add, we'll take a field here, and we're taking a field, not a value, so that we can actually reset the field. Not field, empty string. And in order to add to Firebase, we need to access the collection first. So let me import the collection here. So for that, we're going to have a suites array. And we also have a user array so that we can maintain the local user reference right now. And for suites, I'm going to do list observable, Firebase list observable. And this is going to be of type any for now. That should do. Oops. And the user would be auth state. All right, Firebase auth state. And over here now, I can set the local reference. This dot user is equals to auth, right? So now I can access this auth state in my application from anywhere. And over here, I can say, so let me just initialize the Zweets variable as well while I'm at it. Zweets is equals to AngularFire.database.list, and this will essentially fetch all my data from the root path into this variable, right? And we'll just render this out into the HTML as well. So how do I push data to my to this particular collection if I want to? And since this is a list, as you probably noticed above, we can simply push data to it, and that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to say this dot Zweets dot push, and I'm going to pass in the object. The most important value is the text, and I'm going to do field.value. The second important thing is user, and that is going to be this dot user dot auth dot email. The next important thing is create at, because we want to show the date as well. So we're going to do new date dot toString, and finally we want to store likes as well. So let's initialize that with 0. And that's essentially what we need to do to add a new entry into the database. For key, I'm going to take in for remove, I'll take in a key, which is a string, and I'm going to say this dot Zweets dot remove key. That's it. And since this is Angular 2 and we have an observable, it will automatically update everything in our view. We don't have to bind anything. This is two-way binding we're working with here. Similar to our remove, we're going to have a string key, and we're going to have a count, which is a number, which is the last count of that Zweet that we have. And we can then just call the update function with the key and likes count plus 1. So whatever the count is, add 1 to that and update the object in the database. And again, that's about it. We don't have to do anything else, right? So this is essentially the work that we have to do in our controller. Let's switch quickly to our HTML and wrap up all the functionality in one go. So we start from the top. We have the logout link over here. So if I want to log out, I simply say click logout, and this will log me out. For my add, I will give this field a reference, and then I'm going to use the alright, so we're essentially calling the add function with the field. So this is going to pass in the field to the add function. And what else do we have? We have to render the items. So we have a new variable called Zweets. That's what we're rendering, and we have Zweet over here. So now so essentially ng4 is a loop in our HTML template. So we're looping over all the Zweets that we have in our database. So initially I have some data in there already. So we're going to see that shortly. But we need to var that data up over here as well. So this is not static data anymore. This is all dynamic. So this is Zweet.text. Sorry, this was Zweet.user, the email. And then we have Zweet.text. And then we have the created at for the date. Zweet.created at, and then we can pass in a pipe filter to format the date as well. So year HMA, hopefully that's a valid format. So this is the remove button. You can see the glyph icon remove over here. So when I click the remove button, I want to call the delete function, the remove function, and I want to pass in the reference Zweet.key. So essentially the ID of the Zweet that I'm currently looking at. Very similar to remove, we have the same thing for like, and for my button like, I'll do the same, but I'll do like. Just to double check, yes, we call it like, and we pass in the key and the count. So that's the key, and the count will be Zweet.likes. That's it. And over here, our last part is essentially to make this dynamic as well. So we can update suite.likes. And we have pretty much done it. That was all the wiring we had to do. If you come back here, we can see there's some errors showing up. So let's look into these. All right, so right now, the loop is complaining that it's getting an object that it can't iterate over. And that's because the suites variable is an observable. What observable is, you guys have to Google that. But we can fix this by simply adding this async pipe that we call, and now it should work, right? So it looks the same still, but you'll notice that we're getting data that's dynamic now. It's changing, right? So this is being fetched from Firebase, and this is populating live in our view. Now, if I want to add a new suite, all I have to do is test, and then I click suite, and this essentially adds the suite into my view. And not only that, it is also synced with Firebase as well. So this is in my database. So if I refresh this, I'll still see it, right? And if I click on like, you'll see the increment 1, and that's again, I've updated that object, and it's gone up in the database, and everything is wired up. We have a fully functioning app right now. And likewise, I can click on delete, and this will go away. But before I click on delete, let me just quickly do one little thing. Again, this is not the best for security, but this will work for our prototype. I'm going to say that only show this delete button if I am the owner of the tweet, if I am the user of the tweet, right? So I have the user object already referenced in my controller. So I'm going to do user.auth.email is equals to suite.user. So what this will do is that it's only going to show the delete button on the suites that I have created. Okay? So when we come back, you can see that all the delete buttons are gone. I created one suite, and I can only delete that one. So I can create another one here. And I can delete my old one. And all of this is now being synced in real time with Firebase. Cool. So that's almost done. We'll test our logout functionality as well, and our login functionality, because we didn't do that before. User 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and log in. And essentially, this should log us in again, and we have our session. You can see the user being logged out over here. And so we have implemented all the functionality that we wanted to, and we're ready to deploy this app now, right? So let's move on to that. Let's deploy this app quickly. So what do we need for deployment? Let me just cancel this quickly. We just need to configure Firebase locally and deploy it. Some of you have already done that today, so I'll just review that really quickly. For that, I need to do Firebase init, and it's going to ask me a few questions, and I'm just going to answer them really fast. So I'm going to connect it to my Twitter account. I'm going to create a normal file. It's asking me to install some dependencies. I will let it do that because I need them for my deployment. All right, and it's asking me which folder I want to upload. So I want to upload the build folder that I have for this project, and in Angular CLI that's configured as the dist folder. So I'm just going to change that name here. This is a single page application, so yes, I want to do that, and that's the initialization. That's done. And the final part is, the second final part is I need to first build the project. So I have that dist folder that's going to upload. And this is going to create a very optimized build with an HTML file and a JavaScript file that is AOD compiled. Again, these are all Angular 2 terms. So once you guys start learning about Angular 2, you will see that there are all these optimizations that are done on the build process. And this is done. So now we have, if I quickly do an ls, you can see there is a dist folder here in our folder now. And now the last part was Firebase deploy. And this will essentially deploy the app and configure everything for us on the cloud, and then we can access it and start using it. All right, so while this is deploying, are there any immediate questions that anybody has? Please. Let me get the mic.
आपने इसमें लाइक इम्प्लीमेंटेशन की जिसमें काउंट ऐड होगा, तो अगर मैं इसमें देखूँगा मल्टीपल पीपल सेम टाइम पे काउंट करे होंगे तो जो डेटा की कंसिस्टेंसी है कि काउंट मेंटेन कैसे होगा, देख कैसे लगता है कि अगर मल्टीपल आए तो काउंट एक्चुअली होगा नहीं जितना होना चाहिए.
So right now, जो मैंने structure दिया है code base का, that's in a way that I'm just maintaining a number, right? तो उसमें कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता कि मैं एक बंदा आके 5 दफ़ा भी like कर सकता है. And for my prototype, that's fine. वो मैंने अपनी requirements बनाई हैं. But in case you want to monitor that, you could have, instead of a number, you would have an array with IDs, right? And if, then you would have an ngIf in the condition that if you've already liked this, then you won't see the button there. You'll only see the badge. Firebase also supports validation rules on the backend side. So you can explicitly define that if you receive a like request and the user is in the array, then it's not going to allow that query to pass, right? So you have the security features here. And for those who are following on the terminal, the deployment was complete. And I think within 30 minutes, if I'm not wrong, we have managed to deploy the application. And just to double check, we'll just log in on this app, and yeah, we can log in, and everything is working over here. Cool.